You're watching The Swingmen, presented by the 94 Feet Report.
Welcome to The Swingmen, presented by the 94 Feet Report. I'm your host, Simon Cherin-Gordon, and I'm excited to get the colloquial ball rolling here. Let's start by swinging the rock around to our team, starting with Jared Johnson of Bleacher Report and the 94 Feet Report's first appearance on the show. How are you doing, Jared?
Doing well. Glad to be on.
We also have co-host of the 94 Feet podcast, Corban Ford, with us again.
Hello, everybody. Quick status report on my fantasy basketball team. My second team, the Brokeback Mavericks, finally got their first win, man. It's been almost a whole season, but you know what? I'll take what I can get at this point.
We have Kauai 5-0 and the Brokeback Mavericks. I wonder who's coming next week.
I have one more team. That's for the next show, though. I seriously do have like four, though.
I didn't expect anything different. We have our resident draft expert, Patrick Oxford.
Who else is looking to end this season with the Spurs-Pelicans matchup once again?
And we have our executive producer, Alex West.
I think it was the great 20th century poet Billy Joe Armstrong who said, "Wake me up when September ends."
Yeah, Alex has many wishes entering this postseason. Some of them aren't going to come true. I don't think Kyrie or Gordon are coming back on the court anytime soon.
Yeah, they're not, and this is killing me. What's the point of even having the playoffs, Simon?
Well, he's coming back in round 2, as far as I know. So. Guys, let's introduce this episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. Instead of several different segments, this whole show is going to have a theme, and that's NBA awards. Next week is going to be the end of the regular season, and we're going to get into a postseason preview, so there's no time better than now to get into this. We're going to run through each major award: MVP, Defensive Player, Rookie of the Year, Most Improved, Sixth Man, Coach, and Executive of the Year. And I'm going to get your guys' winners and also your ballots. So let's get started right off from the top with MVP. I think we all have the same winner here, but let's just make sure. Does everyone have James Harden?
I do, yes, Simon.
It seems pretty consensus, Simon.
All right. So that being said, this thing is fascinating after that. I mean, I have a field. I think there's at least 8 guys you could make a case for at number 2. I want to start this off with Jared, first time on the show. Jared, who's your number 2 in this crazy field?
My number 2 would be LeBron. I mean, he just kind of taken the bull by the horns in the last couple months, kind of pretty much averaging a triple-double. Cavs have kind of rebounded from that mid-season swoon a little bit. From there, it gets a little bit dicey for me. I have Davis, Lillard, and Aldridge filling out my ballot. All 3 of those kind of in the same level for me, with Davis just a hair above what he's done since DeMarcus Cousins went out. But as a Spurs fan, I kind of had to put in Aldridge there. I thought I would say his best teammate's probably Kyle Anderson, which is kind of rough for a team hoping to make the playoffs in the West. But he's really kind of made everything come together on both ends. Kind of not just offense. He's been pretty good on defense too. And Lillard, of course, Blazers exceeded all expectations this year. He's had career bests in a lot of categories. So those 5: Harden, James, Davis, Lillard, and Aldridge for me.
All right, so I'm only going to go 3 deep. Obviously, starting with Harden, that's a good place to start, and I don't think there's any sensible argument against that. My number 2 is Anthony Davis, and I feel like Anthony Davis has sort of proven himself to be one of those really unstoppable forces that we see in the league every so often. He's a threat to put up a 45 and 20 every single night, and it feels like he has single-handedly carried this Pelicans roster into the postseason. And so, for me, there's a lot of things that most valuable player can mean. But at the end of the day, it's about getting wins. And Anthony Davis, if you replaced him with a value over replacement player, this would be a team that was 27, 28 wins, that fighting for that bottom of the lottery, because they do not have a ton of talent, particularly once Cousins went down. And then my number 3 is Damian Lillard, and I feel really, really strongly about how well Lillard's played in the past couple of months. I mean, we've talked about it here on the show before, just how much of an impact he's had. And I feel like the Portland Trailblazers are going to be a sneaky tough out. Now that I say that now, mark it down, Simon, because when the Warriors sweep them in a couple of months, I want you to flash back to this moment where I said that they're going to be a sneaky tough out.
I think I'm going to go ahead and agree with Alex that number 2 should be Anthony Davis. But then I'm going to go ahead and go with Jared on number 3 in the LeBron sense. I think both of them have stood out above the rest of their peers. They both have seen a lot of injuries to their teams, and they've both risen to the occasion. Anthony Davis above LeBron James for me, though, because when DeMarcus Cousins went out, Anthony Davis stepped his game up, whereas LeBron's teams have slightly underperformed when his help has been out.
I have to say something about that, only because LeBron James literally welcomed a whole new team after the trade deadline. Like, I mean, I'm sorry that he's just so good that there's just no other higher level until the playoffs. You know what I mean? Anthony Davis didn't, like, open the door to the training room and go, oh, new team, who this? Like, LeBron James, come on, man, we already talked about, I'm going to slow down there, but you got to give him some credit on that. That's a whole roster change of mid-season. You're talking about different point guard. You're talking about different play style. Yes, it all goes through him, but personnel-wise, man, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm a little emotional about that, Patrick, but come on.
Corbin, I see where you're coming from. Anthony Davis was very familiar with his teammate Darius Miller coming into this season.
I want to cut this horse off midstream and say, Corbin, I feel like you're not taking into account who LeBron James has to compete with to win an MVP award, and that is LeBron James. He has been exceptional for nearly a decade and a half now, and I feel like when we don't see pinnacle LeBron seasons, we compare him against those great LeBron seasons that we saw 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago when he was undoubtedly the most talented player we'd seen since Jordan, and he probably still is. And I won't take that away from him, but when you have to compare a great player like Michael Jordan, like Shaquille O'Neal against himself, it becomes very hard as a player starts to age to continue to do the things they did at 27 and 28.
I'm just, like I said, at age 33 in your 15th season, I wish there was more credit given. That's the only argument some of us LeBron stans use now. Oh, it's his 15th year, oh my God. But, I mean, seriously, to have that level of production and to be carrying a team and go through that midseason switch. And mind you, LeBron thrives in chaos. I haven't seen like a normal LeBron season in like 7 years, but you get what I'm going for there. So I'm with you.
I need to jump in here, guys. I think that you say we measure LeBron James against LeBron James, and that might make it harder for him, Alex. I go the other way with this. I think that we're giving LeBron a break based on who he is. I just look at teams like the Portland Trail Blazers, 48 wins. Cleveland Cavaliers, I believe, are at 49 now. Indiana Pacers, 47. These teams are all neck and neck, and they all have one guy leading the charge, and that's Damian Lillard, Victor Oladipo, and LeBron James. Now, does LeBron have better traditional numbers than all those guys? Sure. He also has by far the worst on-off differential. The Cavs are essentially the same team when he plays and when he sits. The Indiana Pacers, without Victor Oladipo, are 13.7 points worse per 100 possessions. The Blazers are over 10 points worse when the Blazers are over 10 points worse when Damian Lillard sits. I don't see more talent on Indiana or on Portland than I see on Cleveland with Kevin Love. The guys they had, there was chemistry issues, but player for player, I don't really see a big difference there. What makes LeBron stand out over those guys other than the fact that he's LeBron?
Simon, I think that's why I took Lillard. I mean, I think that he's been summarily impressive. The same with Anthony Davis. LeBron sort of falls down the ballot for me, and I think it's because not the on-off differential. There's a lot of noise in that number, and there always is. I mean, like last year where the Spurs were defensively better without Kawhi Leonard. I just feel like on-off differentials, there's a lot of noise there. But which is to say, I certainly don't think that anyone would make the argument that LeBron James is a replacement level player when he's playing on the court for the Cavaliers. He's a fantastic player. He sort of makes the engine hum, particularly on offense when they surround him with shooters. But to me, I feel like comparing him against himself is probably a fair comparison. And it knocks him a little bit, but I think that's why I went with Damian Lillard. I went with Anthony Davis over LeBron.
One, as I just mentioned, I'm going to argue against it and I'm going to argue for it in the sense that with Lillard, with Anthony Davis, well, Anthony Davis is still rising, but Lillard, you could say, is at the peak of his powers, in his prime, so to speak, where we can all agree that LeBron is pretty much past that. He's just sustained cresting right now. Also, you did mention Kevin Love, and yes, he's a great talent. And then you had no one else, just like I have no one else, because everyone else on the team, J.R. Smith's had a down year, Isaiah Thomas was ineffective, Tristan Thompson's been ineffective. Basically, everyone else on that team has been varying levels of effectiveness, but neither to match what he's done. And to your credit, LeBron hasn't played particularly spectacular. It is mostly in the traditional numbers and the crazy, athletic moves that show, hey, he still has it. But to be carrying that team, where if you switch them with other players, and that's a hypothetical game I don't want to get into, but it's not like he has a superior cast of talent. It's not even the players aren't even playing right now to the style that he likes to play at, in the sense that there is a glut of bigs, and the shooters are kind of iffy shooters, although statistically better than what he had before. So it's more of the fit, and also, like I said, the transition he's had to go through, and the fact that there are, aside from Kevin Love, who's missed a 10-time injury, other players to pick up the load and pick up the slack with him.
Certainly a fair point, Corban, and there's a million ways to slice this MVP race. It's one of the most convoluted I've ever seen, after number one, of course. But let's move on to Rookie of the Year, which is really, we just have two guys, and that's Ben Simmons and Donovan Mitchell. Unless, I don't know, Alex, are you going to come in with the Jason Tatum hot take? I hope not. But if not, let's debate these two guys. We'll start with you, Alex. If it's not Tatum, who is it?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head that it's a two-horse race. And for a long time, I was in the Mitchell corner because the Utah Jazz were performing so far above expectations, and they really looked like a team that was going to overperform all season. And they've maintained that. However, the Sixers were a team that I thought maybe was underperforming a little bit at that time. And since then, they've switched gears. They've won 12 in a row. And to me, closing the season that strong and heading into the playoffs and maybe being one of the best players in the Eastern Conference is a big deal for Ben Simmons, who has better numbers across the board than Mitchell. And so, sort of weighing those things against each other, you have the assist numbers and the rebounding numbers. And to me, that makes Ben Simmons' case a little bit stronger, but I certainly would not be upset if somebody wanted to argue for Donovan Mitchell, who's been just fantastic.
Maybe a month or two ago, it kind of looked like Mitchell was gonna make that push to get over Simmons, but in the past couple months, Mitchell's played really well. Don't get me wrong, but it's just kind of been consistent the past 3 months or so. Simmons, meanwhile, scoring a little bit down, efficiency up, assists, rebounds up. He's been pretty close to a triple-double. Sixers have been killing it, obviously. So for me, it's close, but kind of when Mitchell kind of just stayed the same, Simmons took his game to another level. Sixers got a really good record. They're, I don't know, what are they, 48-30, somewhere around there, in the race for the third seed. And that was kind of my best case scenario for them this year, around 50 wins, and they're going to come really close to that, if not get it, without Fultz for pretty much the whole year. So I think there's the narrative behind Simmons there. Also the kind of the ball handler stigma. Without Mitchell handles the ball a lot, but Rubio is kind of the guy setting people up more, especially recently. So Simmons just kind of playing well on defense, scoring some, getting good looks for all the shooters, Reddick, Covington. I just think he's a little bit more valuable to his team than Mitchell is.
I do agree with you both for Simmons. However, I think Mitchell deserves more credit for being a rookie, being handed the reins. Hey, you need to be the primary source of scoring for our team. And not only doing that, because there's been a lot of rookies in the NBA who have been handed the reins to a team and told to lead them in scoring, but also on a winning team. And right now, I was actually retweeted this stat earlier, and it's rather arbitrary, but from the Jazz broadcast earlier, he's fifth on the list of most wins by a team with a rookie leading scorer. And he's at 45 and counting. And he's the first rookie to lead a team in scoring that can actually make the playoffs since David Robinson led the Spurs in 1990 with 56 wins. So I thought that was kind of crazy. But when you have a rookie and you say, hey, we need to play through you, you need to lead us in that sense, because the Jazz need offense and he's their main source of production from there. And not only do handle that, and do it with confidence and with polish, but also to be doing it on a successful team. I think that's credit to him. I do agree with Simmons being more rounded and obviously having a bigger impact on the team. But for a Jazz team that, I don't know if we really had great expectations for them to be where they are now and to really essentially be led by a rookie, that kind of spells it for me for Rookie of the Year.
You guys think voters at all will be kind of scared away to vote for Simmons because of the year he took off. I've seen a lot of people make that argument on Twitter, but I don't know if that's necessarily a thing with actual voters for the award.
I think that's a really fair point. That maybe if you feel very strongly that it's a close race, you give the nod to Mitchell. And like I said, like I don't really have any problem that if you decided Mitchell was the outright favorite because of what he did, particularly without Rudy Gobert for a good stretch of the season. You saw this team sort of rise and fall throughout the year, and then Mitchell became such a clutch player that there's honestly really no issue for me how you choose the criteria or which one of these guys that you choose, because they're both incredibly deserving of this award.
All right, so it seems like we're all in agreement that Ben Simmons is the guy, but this is a tight race and it can clearly go either way. For what it's worth, Simmons is also my pick, although Mitchell put a little scare into the race coming out of the All-Star break. Simmons has really ramped it back up when it matters most, both for the Sixers and for voters. But guys, let's move on to Sixth Man of the Year. I think we're going to go kind of back to where we went on the MVP with this one, where we're pretty much debating second and third. Is anyone not buying the Sweet Lou train, or does he have this thing wrapped up? Let's start with Patrick.
Yeah, I think Lou Williams is a pretty easy pick. He didn't play quite up to the standards with Houston last year, which I didn't like, but this year he's been awesome. He's played pretty much as well as you can expect, and hopefully he enjoys the next contract he gets.
Yeah, Patrick, to build on top of that, I think my number 2 vote would go to your man in Houston, Eric Gordon. I think he's played tremendously well. There's been a little bit of a balancing act with the Chris Paul, James Harden dynamic, and I think Eric Gordon was the guy who stood to lose the most out of all that because of the way he had sort of managed the second unit and whatnot. But I feel like he's definitely continued to play at a high level. And if it weren't for Lou Williams' ridiculous sort of outburst with the Clippers this season, I think that Eric Gordon would be taking home the award. And I certainly think he's deserving, but unfortunately, Lou Williams a little bit more deserving. And then if I'm going to throw in a twist, my number 3 is Marcus Morris. And I mean, you can laugh all you want to, Corban, and I know that you are laughing. But Marcus Morris... for a team that has had a slew of injuries in the Boston Celtics, Marcus Morris has really come off the bench, been a very, very potent scorer. He's carried the load for the Celtics team, particularly in the past couple of weeks without Kyrie Irving. And to me, that's warranting maybe a third-place vote.
I just liked your use of the word potent.
Yeah, just to add another name in there, Domantas Sabonis. I think he's been really solid in Indiana. Didn't have a great rookie season in Oklahoma City, but has really embraced the new system.
I think there's kind of a bias against the non-bench microwave scorer as a guard, kind of the Williams, the Gordon, Jamal Crawford, even Will Barton this year. I think there's somewhat of a bias with the actual voters, but a guy like Montrezl Harrell, even though he's playing, 16, 17 minutes a game, I believe he's increased his scoring, per game scoring every month of the year. So I feel like even in these last few games, he's going to get those averages up a bit more, averaging, I think, around 11 and 4 or something like that, which obviously not flashy, but doing it pretty efficiently, really big, just a spark for the Clippers. Brings energy, and Clippers bench, one of the best in the league, obviously, with Lou and Harrell. So
didn't you say you could have had like 10 people on your list, Jared, when we were talking about this in pre-show?
I thought about guys like, Fred VanVleet, basically the whole Raptors bench.
I was about to say that.
Yeah, I mean, if it were allowed, we could put a whole bench unit and put the Raptors on there. You got VanVleet, DeLon Wright, CJ Miles, Pascal Siakam, Jakob Poeltl, DeLon Wright, those guys are amazing.
I want to throw a couple more names into this discussion before we move on. I agree it's a deep field. I also agree that big men tend to get the short end of the stick a little bit. Dwight Powell is a guy, despite Dallas's struggles. I think statistically you could make maybe a better argument for him than Montrezl Harrell. My number 3, though, if I was filling out a ballot, because I agree Lou Williams and Eric Gordon are number 2. To me, it came down to Kelly Olynyk and Thomas Satoransky. Olynyk has been a really solid offensive player throughout, most of the last few years at least. I think he's having his best season to date, and he's also improved his all-around game, defensively, rebounding. Still not a plus there, but he's had to play in a lot of different front court configurations with Miami, next to different bigs, playing the 4, playing the 5. He's been a big cog there. And then Satoransky, I mean, I don't know if this helps his 6-man case, but what he did stepping in with John Wall out and really taking over as kind of the lead facilitator for that team. And, with Wall back and with Wall earlier in the season, still playing kind of a different role just as well. I think he's been really versatile. And those two guys need to be mentioned here. All right, guys, let's move on to Most Improved Player of the Year. Another award, I think the favorite, Victor Oladipo, is going to be close to a unanimous winner. Unless anyone has any disagreements there, let's get right into the rest of your ballots, guys. This is one of the most subjective awards in terms of criteria, so I think there's a lot of room for different directions here, of course, after Oladipo. Why don't we start with you, Corban?
So I'm going to go with Tyreek Evans. Just last year, coming, out of a season of flux, not really sure what his next contract was going to look like, how he was going to play. And then he comes and, on a Memphis team that did very well and performed due to injury and just lack overall talent after injuries decimated them. He averaged 19, 5, and 5 with 45% shooting from the field and 40% from 3. And it wasn't even the numbers he had, which are some of his best since his rookie season, but also the shooting percentage. Not only did he become a very confident shooter from deep, but also very efficient. And I think that was very improved from his skill set and what we saw him coming in.
Yeah, Evans is a good pick. I always not quite sure what to do with those guys who kind of fall off and then get back on the radar. So it doesn't seem like they get rewarded so much, but Evans would probably be in my top 5 to 7. A lot of good guys, but one name I want to bring up is Fred VanVleet. Totally off of people's radars last year. Didn't really play for the Raptors, but this year, definitely one of the best backup point guards in the league. Playing crunch time minutes for the Raptors, who are the cream of the East. Just a really good fit with a lot of lineups. Strong defender too. If you watch him, he gets after guys full court. Reliable 3-point shooter, clutch player. Fred VanVleet would be on my ballot if I were going probably to 4 or 5.
Clint Capella of the Houston Rockets is a guy who's going to benefit a little bit in this. His rise to stardom actually started late last season, and he sort of just followed that along this year. I mean, his numbers are pretty great. 14 points a game, 10.9 rebounds, and obviously he has found his niche, particularly in pick and rolls with Chris Paul. I think he has been one of the real reasons this Rocket team has improved as much as it has. I know a lot of people are going to say the addition of Chris Paul, which obviously adding a Hall of Fame ball handler never hurts. But Clint Capella is only 23 years old, and he's become a massive, massive contributor to this team. And he sort of usurped the role of center from Nene. And I think he's just been huge for this team. And I think he's deserving of this award, even though this rise kind of started last year.
Those are all great names for second place. The name I want to throw out there, Julius Randle. The Lakers came into this season thinking they had to save cap space, which is maybe still going to be a good move. But Julius Randle has capitalized on this freedom that he now has coming into this summer, and he's just really taken off as kind of a small ball-ish 5. Is he the 5? Is he a 4 next to Brook Lopez? It's hard to tell with their roles, but he's just really playing a lot better than I expected. I wasn't too high on him coming into this year, but he's been amazing, and I think he deserves at least some credit. He's not going to win, but some recognition.
Patrick, I'd like to welcome you to Julius Randle Island. Corban and I have been here for a while. We have like little shacks set up on Julius Randle Island, so I guess you're the third member to come on over and to join the party.
I was going to say there is plenty of room. We'll see where free agency holds, though.
That's true.
Is rent as high as Waiters Island? Because it's pretty pricey over there.
I think we're more stable, personally.
I think we get in later. I mean, I think like there are fewer of us here, so you're not quite onto the boom yet. Maybe you're on the tail end of the boom, so you might be buying in. Corban and I bought in years ago.
Early. Kentucky.
Yeah, I messed up.
So,
Yeah, guys, I think the league cracking down on flopping has really done wonders for Julius Randle. I mean, imagine the charges that guy would get if we still were in that era of the league. I want to move on here. I do want to give a quick shout out to Andre Drummond. to me, if you can like double your free throw percentage year to year and then also become a good passing big man in the same season, that's got to be worth some consideration for most improved player, especially for a guy that was hot in trade rumors all offseason. But let's move on to coach of the year. We've talked about it before. One of the most contested races I've ever seen here. We have just so many great coaches in the league right now. Another award where you can go a half dozen, maybe more directions. I don't know who any of you have as your winner, so this is going to be really interesting. Why don't we start with Jared on this one? Who's your coach of the year?
My coach of the year is Brad Stevens. Just up until about 2-3 weeks ago, it was probably going to be Dwayne Casey, but yeah, the Raptors kind of came back to the Celtics a little bit in the standings. Celtics put on a run, a lot of it without Kyrie, and some other injuries too, Marcus Smart, so on. So yeah, Stevens always had a good reputation. I think this is the year he gets it. So yeah.
You know, Jared, I totally agree with you. I feel like Brad Stevens didn't get enough credit for all the injuries that racked up with Gordon Hayward going out the first game of the season, with Kyrie Irving taking an injury late, and how well the Celtics roster has performed amid all these injuries. And I feel like Brad Stevens is the coach of the year, and he nearly just barely edges out Dwayne Casey. But I feel confident that I'm not really being a homer despite what my shirt may say, and I'm pretty excited to see what the playoffs are going to hold for this roster.
Alex, are we going to see what we just saw? Because if so, I really hope you're wrong.
Oh my God.
Listen, when you wear a cool shirt, Patrick taught me one thing. When you wear a cool shirt on the show, you make sure that everybody notices your cool shirt on the show. So.
Don't pull me into this.
You started this.
Well, I don't think Luke Walton is going to win the award because I agree Brad Stevens should win it with everything that's happened to the Celtics this season. I think Luke Walton is another player that deserves some credit. I know I'm kind of on the Lakers bandwagon, which is unusual for me, but it seems like Luke Walton has gotten a lot out of the roster this year. I mean, you look at the improvements from Brandon Ingram as a playmaker. Lonzo Ball was probably already going to be a good defender, but I'll give him some credit there. And just improvements everywhere.
So I'm going to bring it to the East for just a second. I was going to nominate LeBron James. I mean, Coach Lou for, the roster turnover and the varying level of success that he's had with that. But I'm actually going to nominate Doc Rivers. I think you take a team, they lose, their all-star point guard. They go in with a roster that looks, pretty cobbled together, but the piece could fit. Then all the pieces get injured. Then you rock it with a midseason trade where you basically let go of your centerpiece that you signed a long-term contract for in exchange for more players that cobbled together. And yet here they are in the thick of the Western Conference playoffs. And this is almost essentially 3 teams in one season for Doc Rivers. And, his GM skills are totally and completely deservedly made fun of. But his coaching, especially under crisis, is something that I don't think we give enough credit for. And he's done this in the past before. I know he did this one year in Orlando, like a decade ago, taking teams in flux and really making them competitive and scrappy and still very good. So I would nominate him.
I don't disagree with any of your choices. Brad Stevens, Doc Rivers, some really, really great options. But Dwayne Casey, to me, is the clear winner. First of all, the Toronto Raptors are going to finish with the best record in the East, despite a little scare put in by Boston. And Brad Stevens deserves full credit for keeping that team competitive through all the injuries. But I don't think a little late season surge by the Celtics when they pretty much had the 2 seed locked up should really sway this thing. I mean, first of all, coaching in the face of adversity, while impressive, is almost easier. We've been doing what Dwayne Casey has done, and that's taking the same roster that has come short of expectations year after year with, coaching on the hot seat and completely transforming that team, transforming the way they play, raising their ceiling when most people thought they were going to fall off. To me, that's a more impressive coaching job than what Doc has done, what Brad has done, what Pop has done. All amazing work from them. What Casey's done is a little more special to me. And with Toronto on track to have the best season in franchise history, with Casey being a close second or third choice for this award in some years past, I think it's time that he finishes first. All right, guys, let's go on to Executive of the Year, coming down to the end here. This one is a tough one to think about because you kind of have to go back to preseason. You have to look at the trade deadline, look at the draft even. I don't know where we draw the line of delineation for where this starts, but the last NBA year, maybe going back to the draft, which executive has had the best moves? Corban, we'll start with you.
All right. So I think it's an interesting argument as far as executive of the year, whether the moves they make are what they should be judged on, or the moves they make in relation to how well they performed. And I know those kind of go hand in hand, but if you look at it in context as far as the actual personnel decisions, where the team was at the end of the offseason to where they ended up to begin the new season, I think that's important to take into account. For example, I nominated Sam Presti because when the Thunder ended last season, it was Russell Westbrook and a bunch of average to middling players. Victor Oladipo had a very underwhelming season. He was locked into a new contract. Domantas Sabonis had been underwhelming as a rookie. He had shown some flashes, but was also rather underwhelming. And they were a team in flux with no way of really moving because they had no cap space and a lot of money sealed into a lot of players that could either be exposed on the defensive end or brought little else on the offensive end to help Russell Westbrook. And yet, in two great deals, Sam Presti brings in Paul George, who was obviously, I would say, a top 10, top 15 player for two contracts that one was going to balloon starting this next season, and the other was just a rookie, and the other one was a trade for Carmelo Anthony, which I'm saying in name only. These players brought in not only name value, but proven stars that could play alongside Russell Westbrook. Now, obviously, it didn't work out as well as it could have, but in my mind, executive of the year is more of what they did with what they had and how they put the best product on the floor. It's up to the product to perform.
I think that's a really interesting argument, Corban, and I think you phrased that question in a very interesting way because my executive of the year candidate is Dennis Lindsey from Utah. I felt like they did, in a similar situation, losing Gordon Hayward, bringing in Donovan Mitchell, a player who I kind of got gift wrapped to them, but then to see the development of a player like Derek Favors, who played tremendously well without Rudy Gobert, to dig up some of the diamonds in the rough like Royce O'Neal. This is an organization that consistently develops talent, whether they know that they're getting talent when they draft a player or they develop these players into what they will become. And I think that consistency among the Utah Jazz is worth noting. And I think Dennis Lindsey and of course I think Quinn Snyder also has done a tremendous job in making these things happen.
As a Spurs fan, I kind of have my eye on the Rockets a lot. And this past summer, after the Spurs beat the Rockets in 6, I saw the Rockets make a lot of really good moves in the offseason. Spurs are trying to get Chris Paul. No, Rockets get him kind of out of nowhere. Get him. They get PJ Tucker, Ba Mute, end up with Joe Johnson, who's still kind of finding his way. I don't know if he'll bring anything. But even smaller signings like Tariq Black and Brandon Wright, just filling out that roster really well, and having them on the verge of maybe a 67-win season or something after 55 last year. Only a 12-win increase, but they've also been without Paul for a lot of the year, Harden for a bit. So for me, it's Daryl Morey. The Presti argument is pretty interesting because I think that team with Andre Robertson healthy, and if even Melo had played even to expectations, not as far below as he is right now, I think that team would be really good. So I think there is an argument for Presti, but I do think that results should play a little bit bigger role in this debate than would require to put Presti at number 1, if you know what I mean.
Did I ever tell you how smart Jared is? Really knows what he's talking about here. He did miss one signing, the Gerald Green contract. Other than that, he nailed it on the head.
Guys, while we're at it, Corban gave LeBron James a shout out for Coach of the Year earlier. Can I give Kevin Durant a shout out for Executive of the Year? That pay cut he took, look, the Warriors bench has struggled this year. Clearly, Bob Myers is not in the running this year, but I think Kevin Durant should be. Just saying. Let's move on to our last award. We saved one of the most interesting debates for last, and that's Defensive Player of the Year. This is another one where there's no clear-cut winner. I have an inkling that we're going to have the same two guys at the top, but there's room for a couple other guys to get into this conversation too.
Okay, so my Defensive Player of the Year is Joel Embiid. I think just the impact he's made on the end is just terrifying. But I would like to shout out Paul George. And you guys have to hear me out because I don't think these wing defenders are really getting a lot of love this year. He is second in steals, only to his teammate Russell Westbrook. He's first in deflections and fourth in loose balls recovered. That means, if you have that ball showing out as you're making a move, it's gone. He's picking apart passing lanes. He's a terror on that end. And yes, he's, defensively the Thunder have been rather underwhelming, and he's not exactly a lockdown stopper this season. But his impact has been felt, at least on the statistical end. And so I thought I would point that out.
I have Rudy Gobert first, followed very closely by Embiid, mainly because of the minutes. If it were just on a per-minute basis, I think maybe I can speak for most of us that Gobert would probably be the winner. Last year, he was actually my winner on my unofficial ballot before Draymond Green took it. But I feel like just with, I think the Jazz might be third defensively, second or third right now with the Celtics and Spurs. He does have a lot of good talent around him, but teams just don't drive on him very much. He's total deterrent. Embiid is a similar way, a little bit worse defensively in Philadelphia, but still a good team. I think Gobert with those extra few inches of length just makes him that much more terrifying in the middle for opponents than Embiid. Not that Embiid isn't terrifying, but you know what I mean. Just a little bit different there.
Yeah, Jared, I agree with you. I think Rudy Gobert's been fantastic despite only playing 52 games this season. I think that what you have to take apart is sort of that there's not a runaway winner. And if it were 2 seasons ago with the way Draymond Green had played or the way Kawhi Leonard has played certain years, I think that you probably couldn't give it to Rudy Gobert. But because there's not a clear-cut winner in this case, I think I want to go with what I consider to be the best defensive player and the most impactful defensive player, despite the fact that he only played, 60% of the games this season. And I think I'm okay with that because of the impact that he has. Like you said, Utah, one of the best defenses in the league.
I totally get where you're coming from there, Alex, and Jared as well. I think on a per-minute basis, you could say Embiid and Gobert are both probably the top two defenders, hands down, in the league. But looking back at the history of the award, the only time a player has won the award under 2,000 minutes played was Alonzo Mourning in the lockout season in '99. So I think we'd kind of be breaking ground here, not going with a player like Horford, who's over 2,200 minutes. Embiid right now is sitting at 1,912. I think it's doubtful he gets over 2,000 minutes unless he comes back as the masked man earlier than expected. And Gobert is under 1,750 after last night's games, and with 3 games left, it'd be a lot of overtimes to get him to 2,000. So, I mean, my pick is Horford, but I think there's valid arguments all to go around.
Patrick, I'd never be mad that you picked a Celtic. I think that Al Horford has been underrated, and I've said that on this show before. I've said that on my podcast before. Horford, his versatility and his flexibility, the ability to guard guys, every guy from Ben Simmons to Joel Embiid to Kristaps Porzingis to LeBron for stretches. He's just shown this kind of versatility and has been the anchor to the best defense in the league. And it really will be interesting, despite how sad I am about Kyrie Irving being out for the season, to see how this Celtics team really ratchets up their defense, putting Terry Rozier or Marcus Smart into that starting spot. And honestly, we may see a playoff game end in the 80-point range, which I would be thrilled about as a Celtics fan.
80 points combined?
80 points combined. Yeah.
Guys, I want to close this out with one stat of Joel Embiid's here. I think you all make good arguments, and you can't really go wrong. And I do want to give Patrick some credit for bringing in Horford, because I was opposed to it when you started. But it is true that playing defense over, high 70s, 80 games takes a lot more effort than doing it with time off, even if injury is part of it. Defense is a hard thing to maintain, especially when we get into advanced numbers. That being said, I want to throw an advanced number out there. This is my favorite stat of the season. Take it for what it is. But according to NBA.com, Joel Embiid's defensive field goal percentage is 40.9. That puts him number 6 in the NBA. Guys, he's a center. That means that most of the shots he's defending are high percentage shots. The next best pure center in that stat is Steven Adams at 44.8. That's number 85 in the league. So that's pretty staggering to me. Embiid opponents are shooting only 55% at the rim against Embiid. Just some staggering stuff there. Again, take it for what it is. But to me, he's a pretty standout guy. I think that's all the time we have for today, though. It's been a lot of fun debating these awards with you. The season's not over, so these could all change in the next few days, but I think we have a pretty good look at what it's going to be. Guys, do you have any parting words before we close out here?
Yeah, I'd like to direct everyone to the 94 feet draft content. I think we're doing a great job pushing out content. We just had one writer hired to Hoops Habit, so check out our work. We're really going to be ratcheting it up for the Portsmouth Invitational, and then once the draft starts coming around, we're going to be putting out some awesome stuff.
Also, keep an eye out for an article that I'll be writing at 94 Feet Report about these awards. Our whole staff at 94 Feet Report is going to be submitting their picks, and we're going to kind of average those out, and we're going to come up with some consensus awards. So if you guys want to know what we think as a whole, stay tuned for that in the next week or two.
Also, just catch me out there in these streets at the 94 Feet Report handle, trying to start some stuff, get conversation. So, if I tag you, don't get angry. I'm trying to start something, not in that kind of way, but, basketball relay. Let's have some fun, guys.
All right, guys, here's some bad news. I'm not going to be here next week. I'm leaving Simon in charge. If the show goes poorly, I'm blaming all of you, but specifically you, Simon. So just know that the pressure's on.
Oh, man, I'm also not going to be here next week either. It's really rough.
Yes, you are, because you're in charge of the show.
I don't know what we're going to do. I guess we'll talk to you guys in 2 weeks. No playoffs. That's really a shame. But, if I have a change of heart, you'll catch next week's show on this channel. If you subscribe to it, click that subscribe button now. Also follow us at the 94 Feet Report. Like Corban said, he's trying to start some stuff out there. So until next week, guys.
I'd just like to thank, before we go, I'd like to thank Simon for doing the show in a seedy Florida hotel room, apparently. So anyway, thanks, guys. See you next week.
Hey, Simon.
Thanks for watching The Swingmen, presented by the 94